President Trump's tweets were not racist and anti-American, but the U.S. representative's statements he was responding to may have been. Hello, this is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button. Today we're going to be talking about President Trump. As you're probably aware, he's been in a spat with 4 members of Congress on Twitter and elsewhere, and over his statements that they should leave the country. But his statements weren't without context. The statements that have been made by these representatives, I think, are pretty controversial and are worthy of response. I think that more leaders should be speaking out, specifically against U.S. Representatives Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, and Ayanna Pressley. President Trump, in response to the controversy after his statement initially on Twitter on July 12th, on July 16th, he came back and I think clarified his remarks a little. He got a question, should they leave the Democratic Congresswomen? Where should they go? President Trump says, it's, quote, it's up to them. Go wherever they want, or they can stay, but they should love our country. They shouldn't hate our country. You look at what they've said. I have clips right here. The most vile, the most horrible statements about our country, about Israel, and about others. It's up to them to do what they want. They can leave, they can stay, but they should love our country and they should work for the good of our country. And so that's a clarification or expansion upon his thought process here. Initially, Trump had tweeted on July 12th that it's so interesting to see progressive Democratic congresswomen who originally came from countries whose governments are complete and total catastrophe, the worst, most corrupt, and inept anywhere in the world. And if they had a functioning even had a functioning government at all, now loudly and viciously telling the people of the United States, the greatest and most powerful nation on earth, how our government is to be run. Why don't they go back and help fix the totally broken and crime-infested places from which they came? Then come back and show us how it is done. This led to much controversy, calls of, frankly, disproportionate calls saying that this is racist, that this is un-American. I think it was ill-considered, personally. Of the 4 Congress women that he's criticizing, only one of them was born overseas. That's Ilhan Omar. And everyone that has come to the United States one way or another, whether via immigration or otherwise. And so when you say go back where you came from, it's going to be divisive. But what's Trump responding to? He has a point about some of the divisive statements that have been made by these representatives. So I've read you what Trump said. Let's look at what he's responding to, because you may not be aware of it. And I think that context is important. He didn't just come out of the blue and say, get out of the country if you don't like it here. He's responding to something. So you have, let's start with Ilhan Omar. On February 10th, she had tweeted, it's all about the Benjamins, baby. This was in response to House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, Republican out of California, stating that Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib should be reprimanded by the House of Representatives for their statements against Israel. And so her response was, oh, it's all about the Benjamins. And when another Twitter user asked the representative who she thought was paying those politicians, Omar tweeted, AIPAC. That's the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. It's one of the largest pro-Israel organizations in Washington, D.C. So that's a pretty anti-Semitic. She's implying greatly that Jewish money is controlling Congress. This is absolutely anti-Semitic. It's racist. And Omar then deleted the controversial tweets. Obviously an acknowledgement that was wrong. She shouldn't be saying that Jews are controlling Congress. It's very anti-Semitic. Elsewhere, Omar had joked in 2013 about Al-Qaeda and the U.S. Army in America and England. She said, quote, when I was in college, I took a terrorism class. The thing that was interesting in the class was every time the professor said Al-Qaeda, his shoulders went up. And but it is that you don't say America with an intensity, you don't say England with an intensity, you don't say army with an intensity, but you say these names Al Qaeda because you want that word to carry weight. You want it to be something. Well, I think that the reason people are going to respond harshly to Al Qaeda is because they're terrorist organizations that kill innocent civilians on purpose. They targeted America on 9/11. They took out the Twin Towers. They had a plane hit the Pentagon. One of the planes crashed in Pennsylvania, and over 3,000 people died. That's why Al Qaeda was gone to war with by the United States in 2001. That's why we went to Afghanistan. And that, that's what the war on terrorism was all about. There's no moral equivalence between the Army, America, England, and Al Qaeda. But does and and now she's a representative of Congress. It's her job to provide support for U.S. armed forces who are still fighting Al Qaeda and other terrorist organizations in the Middle East and Asia and elsewhere. So I think a good question for Omar might be: does she still think Al Qaeda and the army are the same? I don't think they're the same. I think that's pretty not a good thing to say. I mean, and you're seeing this play out. I think that a large part of what Trump is saying is, if you're coming to America, you should respect America as an immigrant, and now she's a citizen. But this is kind of boiled over at a rally in North Carolina. Supporters of President Trump unfortunately chanted, quote, "send her back." I say unfortunately because I don't think that's very classy. Omar's a U.S. citizen. She's a member of Congress. We're not sending U.S. citizens anywhere. They belong here in America. That's, this is their country. And Trump has actually kind of come out against those statements. He's saying that he wasn't happy about it. You can see it here on Drudge. Trump disavows "send her back" at rally. And I think that he's wise to tell his supporters. I was not happy about it. He says, I disagree with it. But again, I didn't say it. They did, but I disagree with it. It was quite a chant. I felt a little bit badly about it. And but it's a rally, and sometimes the crowd starts chants, and the politician or the person's not going to be in control of it. But and let me say, I don't think this was President Trump's finest moment. I don't think that it was ill-considered to say, if you don't like it here, leave. But what he's responding to, I think, is worse, and it's about time somebody stood up and said something about what these representatives have been saying. So let's go on. I mean, we've covered Ilhan Omar, Rashida Tlaib. On May 10th, in a podcast, she said that thinking of the Holocaust gave her a common feeling. What? A common feeling about the Holocaust? This is what she said. She said, "There's always kind of a common feeling I tell folks when I think of the Holocaust and the tragedy of the Holocaust and the fact that it was my ancestors, the Palestinians, who lost their land, and some lost their lives, their livelihood, their human dignity, their existence in many ways have been wiped out, and some people's passports. And just all of it was in the name of trying to create a safe haven for Jews post the Holocaust, post the tragedy, post the horrific persecution of Jews across the world at the time. And I love the fact that it was my ancestors that provided that right in many ways, but they did it in a way that took away their human dignity, and it was forced on them." So here she's opposing, I guess, the creation of Israel, or how it was created in 1948. But this is very insensitive. She's, for one thing, romanticizing the Holocaust, where 6 million Jews and 11 million other Russians, Ukrainians, Poles, and others were murdered viciously by the Nazi regime. And this is not really accurate. Jews have been living in the lands of the current state of Israel for centuries, predating the Holocaust. Modern Zionist movements and emigration also predated the war. And during that period and after the war, the creation of Israel was not accepted by the Arabs. It led to the War of Independence and the series of wars that followed with Israel's neighbors. So Arabs didn't create a safe haven for Jews in Israel. They were opposed to it. They were fighting wars over it. I mean, Palestinian terrorists, frankly, have been shooting rockets at Israel for years in opposition to Israel even existing. That the Jews would have a country of their own and self-determination. I for one, think all peoples have a right to self-determination. Um, and the Jews would fall in that category. I think that I support Israel. I think that it should be allowed to exist. It's been officially established since 1948, and I don't think it's going anywhere. As Philip Klein notes in the Washington Examiner, as for the Palestinians, their leader in World War II was an ally of Nazi Germany. I mean, that's a fact. Here we can. He talks about it here. During World War II, the Palestinian leader at the time, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, Muhammad Amin al-Husseini, met with Adolf Hitler and allied with the Nazis. As the U.S. Holocaust Museum Memorial Museum recounts, here's an article in the Holocaust Memorial Museum about the Mufti of Jerusalem. Quote, al-Husseini collaborated with the German and Italian governments by broadcasting pro-Axis, anti-British, and anti-Jewish propaganda via radio to the Arab world, inciting violence against Jews and the British authorities in the Middle East. So, again, the Arabs were not supporting the creation of Israel, and they certainly weren't supporting Jews during World War II. They were calling for violence against Jews. And so I think there's a little bit of historical revision going on here. To ignore this concept is it's wrong. I think that Tlaib got this wrong, and as Klein noted, quote, she's making this claim in the context of arguing for a one-state solution, the goal of which has always been for Arabs to overwhelm the Jewish population and then force them as a minority to be governed by the people who are currently launching rockets at them. So I mean, you're not going to have a Jewish home land, a Jewish state under that context. And given the history of persecution, the reason for the creation of Israel in 1948 was so that they would have a safe haven from everyone else. Basically, Jews have been persecuted for over 1,000 years wherever they move. They were kicked out of Israel in the diaspora, and then migrated to Africa, through Europe, to Eastern Europe, until finally the Holocaust. And after that, where are Jews supposed to live? I mean, many of them came to America, and many of them went to Israel, and that's their right to do that. I think that people should be allowed to live. The country's been there since 1948. It's not going anywhere. So let's move on now. We've covered Tlaib, we've covered Omar. Here's Ocasio-Cortez. On Twitter, she was comparing U.S. Border Patrol and ICE to Nazi Germany and the SS. She says that we've established concentration camps on the southern border of the United States for immigrants where they are brutalized with dehumanizing conditions and dying. It's another absurd proposition. Certainly anti-American to suggest that we're actually Nazi Germany when everybody in federal custody is subject to judicial review, but nobody in a concentration camp ever was. Going back to the Holocaust museums, their definition of concentration camps, key facts, what distinguishes a concentration camp from a prison in the modern sense is that it functions outside of a judicial system. The prisoners are not indicted or convicted of a crime by judicial process. Well, that's not what's happening on the southern border. If you're turned over to the Justice Department because you were for illegal entry, let's say, and that happens in the Trump administration, the Obama administration, the Bush administration. That's been happening for years. They're enforcing the law. You go to a judge. You're gonna have a trial there, and in addition to that, there's immigration judges. Over 400 immigration judges at the current moment, and all over the country that are hear immigration cases, and that's that's what should be happening. This is we have judicial review, so this is not a concentration camp, and not by I think this is a pretty credible source, the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. I think they know what concentration camps are. I think they know how many people died in these concentration camps. Anywhere from 15 to 20 million people were murdered in the Holocaust. Very few people survived. We know about the survivors, but less than 500,000 people survived. Upwards of 20 million people were murdered. So there was a mortality rate in these camps and in the Holocaust of 95%. There's a mortality rate in U.S. detention facilities of far less than 1%. Yeah, federal prison, state prison, same thing. I mean, this is America. We're not murdering people in prison or whilst they're in detention. These aren't concentration camps. They're not Nazi concentration camps. But this is irresponsible of Ocasio-Cortez. Others have adopted this line. Here's Sean King for The Intercept. He says, history has taught us that concentration camps should be liberated, but we can't wait until 2020. Now, he says that this is not a call for violence, of course, but they should be liberated. And I think that he says it here. He's not trying to be inflammatory. I don't mean this as a threat of violence or physical force, but I thought that concentration camps were supposed to be liberated. This was on June 29. And just about a week or so later, an Antifa member, I think responding to Ocasio-Cortez's concentration camps, perhaps he read Sean King as well. He attacked an ICE detention facility. He firebombed a truck there. He tried to blow up a propane tank. And here in his manifesto, he was citing the same rhetoric that these are concentration camps, and that and that he's not standing by. So this is not surprising when you have members of Congress, when you have members of the media who are telling their followers that we live in Nazi Germany and they're concentration camps. It's unsurprising when individuals start to take matters into their own hands, and they're going to engage in political violence. In this case, I'd call this an act of domestic terrorism. They're trying to blow up an ICE facility. That's a government facility. They shouldn't be doing that, and that's a crime. And he was shot dead on the scene. But there you go. And Ocasio-Cortez is comparing America to Nazi Germany and says we have concentration camps, which are now inspiring acts of political violence and terrorism. Now, we can address the conditions at detention facilities. I think Congress has done that. The problem, I think initially, is that they had only provided 52,000 beds, but you have over 100,000 people showing up every month being apprehended on the southern border. It's not enough resources to accommodate everybody. 104,000 in June, 144,000 in May, 109,000 in April, 103,000 in March, 76,000 in February, 58,000 in January. This is far above the norm. This is an acceleration and expansion of migration, people fleeing drought in Central America. They're coming here, but we can't accommodate them all. And the conditions are, they're not going to be good because the facilities are going to be overcrowded. But, by my count, Ocasio-Cortez, she voted against the bill, $4.6 billion of humanitarian aid on the southern border. This was the emergency supplemental. This was on June 27. Most Democrats voted for it. 129 Democrats voted for it. 95 voted against it. Ocasio-Cortez was opposed. I guess because it wasn't the House version of the bill. It was the Senate version of the bill. But I mean, that's no excuse. You want to help people on the border, you vote for this. You vote for this bipartisan supplemental, so you can improve conditions on the border. But even if they had voted on the House version, I doubt it would have assuaged Ocasio-Cortez's views about the concentration camps. You don't go from being Nazi Germany to a humane republic because you pass a bill. I think that her objections are basically just to enforcement. The fact that we're apprehending people, they have to be detained. She doesn't want people to be detained. That's what I think that's what the radical left here is objecting to, and AOC is no different. Moving on, we've gone through Ocasio-Cortez, Tlaib, and Omar. Here's Ayanna Pressley on July 13th. She suggested at the Netroots Nation Convention that she doesn't, I don't want to bring a chair to an old table. This is the time to shake the table, she says. Well, this is the time to redefine that table, because if you're going to come to this table, all of you who have aspirations of running for office, so here she's talking about members of Congress, if you're not prepared to come to that table and represent that voice, don't come, because we don't need any more brown faces that don't want to be a brown voice. We don't need black faces that don't want to be a black voice. What? This is, frankly, this is quite racist. I'd say it's no understatement. And for the white member of Congress that said, quote, we don't need white faces that don't want to be a white voice, it would have been rightly criticized and pilloried as racist. And if that representative had been a Republican, she would have resigned by now. But today, there's nobody calling on the Democratic side saying Ayanna Pressley is racist and must resign. There's no pressure from the media that she ought to resign or walk back the statement. I mean, and frankly, this is not the type of representation that I think that the framers envisioned. We represent. If you're a member of Congress, you represent everyone in your district. And just taking a quick gander at her district. It's this Massachusetts 7th congressional district, and you have 33%, 34% are white, 26% are black, 11% are Asian, and 22% are Hispanic. Is Presley saying she only represents the 26% of her district who are black? I think that's wrong. And it's just not the President Trump, he's the president for all Americans, regardless of race, creed, religion, etc. Madison wrote in Federalist, quote, the door of this part, talking about the House of Representatives of the federal government, is open to merit of every description, whether native or adoptive, young or old, and without regard to poverty or wealth, or to any particular profession of religious faith. And, I would add race to that, that we have an open House of Representatives. People can run for it. People like Presley, people like Omar, like Tlaib, like Ocasio-Cortez, or Kevin McCarthy, or Steve Scalise, or Devin Nunes. I think that there's a lot of room in the House of Representatives for people from all across the country of various political parties to run and to represent the people of their district. But I don't think that suggesting that you represent your race before you represent your district and your country, I think that's wrong. That's racist, and and someone should say something about that. That's not I don't think that's a good statement. It's kind of destructive. It's very divisive. If we're gonna look at what Trump said is divisive, I think what he's responding to is even more divisive. And so I'll go further. I think it suggests a lack of belief in America as a nation as a whole. We were founded on the proposition that all persons are created equal. They have equal liberty. And this is also aspirational. We didn't start out that way. Not everyone was a part of the franchise, and with great leadership and great struggles like the Civil War, the franchise has been expanded. And I think we're a stronger nation for that. But do we have a country anymore? I mean, do people still believe in that proposition, that we're all Americans and we're all created equal? Frankly, I think the State of the Union is poor. I don't think it's Trump's fault. I think, and where I agree with him, in his most recent statement of July 16, we shouldn't hate America. We should be working to make it a better place, tearing it down, comparing it to Nazi Germany, saying that we should represent our race before our country, suggesting that Jewish money controls Congress. That's destructive. That fuels division. And I, for one, am glad that President Trump called it out. It's about time somebody did. And I think most people get it. I don't think what he said was racist. I know others are disagreeing, and, let's just agree to disagree on that. I think there's a context for what he said, and I'm trying to give you that context. I read you his tweets, and I'm reading you some of the statements from the members of Congress that he was criticizing, rightly so, I think. If you don't like him, I think there is a context. He didn't say this out of the blue to leave the country. There is a context, but the context of saying we're Nazi Germany and their concentration camps is extremely misguided. And Antifa, again, just tried to blow up an ICE facility, responding to that rhetoric. And so I think you get an idea that it's irresponsible on the part of these members of Congress. And again, I don't think this is Trump's best moment. I think that what he said was divisive too, but what he was responding to was more divisive. But what we should, we need to elevate our dialogue. We should be moving forward. We have real problems that need to be fixed. The southern border is still not fixed, and I think that our asylum laws can be worked on. It's easily something Congress could do. They could provide more resources on the southern border. They could create more deterrence to entry, so that people are not making the dangerous trek. One thing, that we're not going to do is open the country up to just unlimited immigration on the southern border or any port of entry. We have an orderly system, and people want to have legal immigration. So long as unless we're going to repeal those laws, but the laws aren't repealed, so we should be enforcing the law. I think that's part of the rule of law and limited government. You've enforced the laws, even if you disagree with the laws. Where Congress changes the laws. If these members of Congress don't like the laws, then they should vote to change them, I suppose. But for now, it's up to President Trump to enforce them, and so that's where we are. I think that but we need to elevate our discourse, and I'll leave you with the close here. In his latest statement on July 16, quoted above, Trump was far more conciliatory. His second statement that go wherever you want, they can stay, they can go, but they should love our country, they shouldn't hate our country, acknowledges that the first statement was indeed divisive. And I call on the representatives he is rightly criticizing to do better too. And we should all be able to do better. There's a lot of heated discourse. That's fine. We have disagreements, across political parties, ideology, philosophy. But we should have civil disagreements. We have a civil society. We shouldn't be engaged in political violence. That's wrong. And we don't need to be calling for send her back or anything like that. That's not going to solve anything. And so let's do better, elevate our discourse, and unite this country, not on every issue, but in the determination to represent all Americans and try to solve at least some of these issues. And that's the commentary. This is Robert Romano, Vice President of Public Policy with Americans for Limited Government, dailytorch.com. Hit that subscribe button, ring the bell for notifications, and have a great day.